Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle, and this is Secrets of Life and Death. I'm going to be talking today about fear. And first of all, I want to apologize for being a little late and also for appearing, and I will not be able to see when you post or say hi because I'm on my desktop and not on my smartphone because for some reason my smartphone has decided not to give me Facebook Live right now. So I've got to figure out what that's all about. But let's talk about fear. Fear is really happening a lot right now in the world. Uh, the COVID-19 virus that's threatening to kill a lot of people and make a lot of the rest of us very sick. And fear is a natural part of being human. It's a natural part. It's part of the programming that comes with these bodies. And fear is actually a good thing. It helps us to stay safe, to keep alive. And in fact, right now, this whole scare that's going on in California, because we have a fair number of cases of the virus, and we're being told to stay at home and not go out into crowds. And that's actually a really good idea, because that is one of the ways in which we might help to stem the tide of the spread of that virus. But that's not why I'm here to talk about the fear of the virus. I'm actually here to talk about a different kind of fear. And it's a fear that prevents us from moving forward in our lives. It's a fear that prevents us from living our brilliance. It's a fear that often disguises itself so that we think that we're acting rationally or for good reason. But actually what we're doing is we're holding ourselves back from moving forward. And forward in what? Well, I focus on three areas. That is wealth, health, and love. And the same kind of dynamic takes place whatever your particular interest is or whatever your particular goal is. And maybe all three of those are your goals. But the underlying issues are pretty much the same. So let's talk about some of the things that happen that bring up fear in our lives around moving forward. So one of them is changing our patterns. That is, we learn patterns when we're children that keep us alive and keep us safe. And they are very ingrained and very rooted. And when we try to change them, it brings up fear. And sometimes we disguise that fear so that we don't have to recognize that we're actually operating from a place of fear. Number two, it can come from whenever you try to up level. So you may be trying to build a business or to take it to the next level, or maybe you're looking for a new partner. Maybe you went through the loss of a partner and now it's time to start looking and fear comes up. Or maybe you're trying to develop a new health regime and the resistance shows up. So, and then the third one is that the world changes and life sends you challenges. And you are forced to adapt. And you may adapt in and let the fears run in, jump in, and hold you back. What I believe is that our spiritual being, our higher self, uses these challenges to wake us up, to get us to move. And I have many examples in my own life story of how my higher spirit kept on sending these life challenges to wake me up. Now, sometimes that sounds a little harsh, especially if you've lost somebody that's really close or somebody that's very dear to you is sick, that somehow you should see that as a challenge for waking you up. But frankly, I treat everything as an opportunity for self-development and growth. And that's what I invite you to do. So how do we disguise fear so that we don't have to address it? Well, one of the ways in which we disguise fear, our fear, is through illness. Many people get sick when they want to move forward. They develop some sort of illness, or they get exhausted, or they get the flu, and it's a really, really great excuse for not moving forward. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, I had an accident. I can't do this right now. And well, you could think that that's just life. It showed up, and what can you do? But I have talked to many people who constantly have these crises show up, these health crises. And every time they start to move forward, they have another crisis. And then you have to start to get suspicious that maybe this health crisis is resistance. This is fear of breaking the old pattern. This was not particularly my problem, because when I was growing up, my mother and my grandmother, they did not give any support or attention when I was sick. My mother's idea of taking care of a sick child was to plop them in front of the TV set. So I didn't get any extra TLC or loving care, very little. When I had the measles, my mother gave me some sort of blue medicine that knocked me out. And that was her idea of a good medicine, was just keep the child unconscious until she's better. So I didn't develop that particular pattern, but I know many people who have. And I'm actually, although it was harsh when I was a child, I'm actually grateful not to have that particular pattern. But that doesn't mean that I don't have other patterns, or that you don't have other patterns. So another pattern or way in which we disguise our fear is being too busy. As long as you're busy, you don't have time to change your habits. You don't have time to up-level yourself. You're always running around being busy, 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 busy. Oh, I don't have time. I'll do this next week. I'll do it the week after. When this gets out of the way, when the children grow up, when my husband finishes whatever he's working on, when we get the house renovated, when we finish the spring cleaning. And so you always keep on putting it off and off and off. And that's because you're not dealing with the fear underneath. And it all seems totally reasonable, and yet you're not moving forward. And I like to remind people, this was my theme for many, many, many years. This was my mission, was to wake people up to the fact that life is short. And if you don't start moving forward, you're going to die with regret. You never know how long you have to live. So it's a good idea to address these things right here, right now. Not wait until the virus is gone, not wait until the stock market comes up, but address it now, because you can actually start to change your life by addressing it now. And if you want to have a conversation with me, I'm Dr. Michelle Petacola, and there's a link over there. I offer a free 15-minute conversation to find out how you are holding yourself back. What is your resistance pattern? So I've mentioned illness, and I've mentioned busyness. Another one that's really, really popular is the family crisis. I have a friend who every time she is ready to launch a project or to do a big event, she and her husband get into a vicious argument. It's gotten to be such a pattern that she usually goes away the night before so that she doesn't have to get into an argument. And what's that about? Is that her? Is she provoking the argument? Or is the problem that the relationship is not getting what it needs? And that could also be. So maybe it's not about the business, it's about the relationship. But it does definitely sabotage her efforts. I have another client who every time she tries to move forward, something happens with one of her children. There's a health crisis or an emotional crisis that gets in the way. And so she's always having to put everything on the back burner until the crisis is over. Now you can say, well, that's life. That's what happens when you have children. I invite you to take a look and see if there isn't some way in which you are inviting that crisis. We actually are very powerful creators. And if we're really afraid, we can create the exact excuse that we need that will sabotage our efforts. So another one is no money. So maybe you have the money saved, you're all ready to go on a cruise, or you're all ready to launch a project or study with a coach or do something, and the car breaks down, or the water heater breaks, or the roof needs it needs to be repaired, or something happens. Oh, your teeth, that's a really good one. Oh my gosh, you have to pay like $4,000 for a new crown, right? Or root canal. Yeah, and suddenly this huge gob of money has to be spent on something else. So, oh, I guess I can't do that. Well, wouldn't you like to change that pattern so that you can actually move forward with your particular goals to have the success you want, either in wealth or health or love? Let's see if there are any more. Okay, so here's another one. You rationally think that maybe you are not ready yet. So you have all these excuses for how you're not ready. Oh, I don't have enough education. I need to have another certification. Or I'm not good enough. Or I always fail. Why do I bother? And these thoughts can really hold you back. And they are probably your best format for recognizing that it's fear that's underlying the problem. It's resistance, and the fear underneath the resistance that's holding you back. Because if you look at the thoughts that you're having, you could probably identify them all the way back to your childhood. You could probably connect them all the way back to your childhood and thoughts or beliefs that were taught to you as a child. So then the last reason, the fear disguising, is the outside world. Oh, the stock market's gone down. There's no way that I can launch this project while the stock market's down. Nobody's going to buy. Or, oh, it's the holidays. Nobody's going to buy right now. Or it's the holidays, I need to take care of this stuff, and therefore I can't take care of that stuff. Or, oh, it's the virus. Nobody is going to be interested in my program. Or it's too dangerous to go out and work on my health. I can't get the food I need. I have to eat what's ever in the house. It's a logical excuse. One of the favorite excuses is, oh, it's Friday. Nobody wants to talk to me on Friday. And then it becomes Monday. Oh, Monday's too soon. People are just starting with their week. And the next thing you know, it's Friday again. And you can't get moving forward. So these are all the ways in which we hide our fears so that we don't even have to look at our fears. And yet, in order to move forward, to create more success, you have to work through those fears in order to move to the next level. And it's inevitable that when you're trying to move to the next level, when you're trying to change early childhood behavior patterns, that's what's going to happen. So let me talk a little bit about the inner childhood patterns and how they create these fears. So I'm going to, this is what I have learned from being a psychosocial analyst and doing psychosomatic coaching, is that we develop these patterns as children to keep ourselves safe. And we develop these patterns because as children, we are dependent on our parents. And if we do not create a pattern that keeps us safe, we could actually perish. So it's natural. It's a natural response to a difficult situation. And you might say, well, my parents weren't particularly bad. Well, they don't have to be particularly bad. It's just that most parents are only repeating what they were taught when they were children. And for a long time, we didn't realize that children need more than just food, shelter, and clothing. The children actually need love and nurturance and touch and encouragement and support. And a lot of parents don't understand that. And here are some of the patterns that I've noticed that show up. Sometimes the parents are overprotective. So here's maybe the nurturing, but it's in spades, and the parent is, or the mother is too protective. You say, well, why would that be a problem? Well, actually, you develop a fear pattern in the child, because now the child never feels safe except when the mother is taking care of them, because that's what they're used to. Plus, the fear of the mother gets conveyed over to the child. And so what results is a child that is always wanting to manipulate for that attention, to get enough attention from the mother so that they can feel safe. They're insecure. And a similar pattern to that is the child who is underprotected, with parents that are neglectful, for example. And what happens here is, again, the child feels insecure. But unlike the child who's been overprotected, this child often feels like it's their fault, that they actually need to do something in order to be worthy of their parents' attention, and they become pleasers. And they find behavior that draws attention to them. They might become performers, or they may become perfecters, different flavors of the pleaser to get their parents' attention. Whereas the child who was overprotected may feel a certain sense of entitlement and might respond by not getting that attention with anger and tantrums in order to get what she wants. It really depends on what she learned as a child and how her mother responded and what her mother responded to. So another pattern is where the parent is too critical. Now, you might think that the too critical parent would produce children that were pleasers, that tried to please the parent and satisfy them. However, a critical parent also often is displaying their own childhood pattern. And as long as they're critical, they feel in control. So as long as they're criticizing the child, they feel in control. So they can never let the child win. They always have to find fault. And that develops a rebellious pattern. At a certain point, the child says, well, forget you, I'm going to figure it out my own way. And that's what they do. Now, you start to realize that these patterns have a certain amount of survival benefits from them. So, for example, a pleaser might do really well in school and might really do well as an employee because they're always trying to please their teacher, please their boss. Where it falls down is when that person wants to up level, when they want to stand more in their power, when they want to do something that pleases themselves rather than pleases somebody else. With the person who has the pattern of the rebel, or rather pleasing themselves, or I like to call this pattern either the manager or the controller, this person, they take control of their lives. They might be very successful in the world because they don't let other people get in their way. They don't let other people's opinions affect them because they have just said, forget it. I'm not even going to listen to them. I'm going to do what I need. And where these people run into problems is in relationships. They might be very successful in the business world, or not, because maybe they're a little too controlling and maybe they're really hard on their employees. But when it comes to relationships, they often get into relationships where their partner is their project, and they are too controlling and they are too critical, like their parents, and that can often undermine the relationship. Now, the final pattern is that I want to talk about is the abusive. And this can be either an abusive in the sense of sexual abusive, or it could be physical abusive, or it could be both. Now, if it's just sexual abusive, sometimes it results in a sense of empowerment for the child, a combination of empowerment and also shame. You say, empowerment? How could a child feel empowered? Well, just think about it a minute. If this little child is able to get the attention of their parents, and their parent is literally incapable of resisting them, that gives that child a certain sense of power, doesn't it? I mean, and that's what children are really looking for, is being able to have some sort of control of their universe, of their world. Now, if there is physical pain, that's a different mechanism, because when it's pain, then there is real fear, and there is the need to eventually control that situation. And that may be control in the sense of getting a boyfriend who will come and beat up your father, or it could be control in the sense of running away, or, if it's physical abuse, getting strong enough to fight back, or one of those mechanisms. But it's a taking control of your situation. And again, like the previous pattern where the parent is overcritical, in this case, the child is not as subject to the desires or wants or demands of the parent at a certain point. Now, early on, when your life depends upon kind of keeping things smooth and quiet and safe, you might do a lot of placating or pleasing. So these evolve, and I don't want you to think that there's only one pattern and not many patterns, because oftentimes you might find that you use different patterns depending on the situation. So I invite you to take a moment and post in the comment section what kind of patterns you recognize in yourself. Are you a pleaser? Are you a victim? A victim is somebody who feels like they can't do anything, and they're always looking for somebody to rescue them. And certainly if you've been subject to violence, that might be your pattern. Or you might be a manager controller and you take the world into your hands and you don't let anybody get in your way. Or you might be a self-soother. And I think all of us do this to a certain extent. We find behaviors that reduce the fear, such as eating or drinking or drugs or working, that take our mind off of our fear. Unfortunately, some of these patterns lead to those illnesses or other situations, crises or whatever, that cause us to have to respond. So I always see the world as in some way trying to wake us up, and the inner child, the little inner child, wanting to stay safe, wanting to keep the status quo and resisting. And so there's this dynamic of, and then of course there is our higher mind, our spirit, who is trying to push us forward to step into our power. And so there's this constant dynamic between the fearful body, the fearful inner child, and that impulse to have what we want and to become the powerful person that we really are inside. Now, the problem with these patterns is that sometimes they're subconscious. We aren't even aware of them. And that's why I mentioned a whole bunch of them, to kind of bring them to the surface and see if you can notice in your daily behavior whether you have any of those patterns, and start to pay attention to them and see how they land, and see if when you try and change that pattern, you try and do something different, do you actually feel fear? Fear that, tightening of the chest, the shallow breathing, sweaty palms, eyes dilated, laser focused, because fear is a real physiological response to a situation that we feel is life-threatening. Now, of course, it isn't really. In fact, one of the problems with human beings is that we imagine, and we're capable of imagining into the future, something happening, and that controlling us with this projected fear. And it's not even here. Like, for example, a virus. Right now, unless you have the virus, unless you're having symptoms, it's all projection into the future. So right now, you don't have to feel fear. Can you let your body relax? Right now, you're fine. And even when those emotional triggers happen and you feel the fear because you're trying to do something different, or you're trying to step to a higher plane, or you're trying to get what you really want, and that fear comes up, this is something actually that I work with. And if you want to have a conversation with me about how I work to change the patterns so that you can really change the way in which you handle the fear, that you break through the fear, that you release the emotions that are around it, and you actually can move forward. Sometimes that fear can keep you stuck in your tracks for years, for all those ways in which I told you that we hide our fears. So if you want to have a conversation, there's a link in the comments section. Go ahead and click on it and schedule a conversation. So how do we change? How do we change? And these are the things that I work with my clients on. One is that you have to recognize the pattern. I've given you some examples of patterns, but sometimes these patterns are so subconscious, they're so subtle that we don't even notice them. And the more you peel the onion and get deeper and deeper into layers, you notice, oh, there's the pattern. So for example, in the pleaser, one of the dynamics of a pleaser is that they are addicted to likes. They're addicted to approval. That's when they feel safest. So sometimes the people pleaser will do things to make sure that they get that approval, but they're not moving forward to get the results that they want. So they get the likes, they get the pats on the back, but they're not successful in business, or maybe they're not getting the wedding ring, or they're not getting the results that they really want. So that's the way in which those patterns can be very subtle and very resistant. So the second thing is that you need to allow your feelings. Now, this is one of the problems that a lot of people who do the law of attraction work or tapping forget about, is that you can't change the mind without releasing the emotions. It's like trying to put a Band-Aid on a deep wound. You need to release the poison underneath. And a lot of people do not know how to do that. We live in a culture where people really learn to tamp down their feelings, because we do not, unless it's fear, this culture really likes fear, but when it comes to grief or emotions of anxiety, we give you pills, ways to tamp it down. You don't want to show up angry at work, and so you learn to control it. And think about it. They send children at the age of 5 to school and sit them in these tiny desks for hours at a time. And that's what we learn, is how to control these bodies, to operate from the head up. So that's one of the things that I help my clients with, is releasing the emotions in a way that you don't get swamped, you don't get overwhelmed, you actually let it release the energy out of your body. So that's number 2. Number 3 is you actually have to change your response. You have to change the pattern. And that takes fear, breaking through the fear and taking new action. And sometimes you don't even know what the action is that you're going to take. And it takes a certain amount of trial and error. And then to recognize when you use fear and sabotage to undermine yourself, and what to do when you do sabotage yourself. And finally, I encourage you to get help, because it's really hard to see what you're doing with this 2 or 5-year-old in your brain telling you what to do and what the truth is, because she or he has got control of your body, and she's got control of your mind, and she's got a whole array of chemistry to make you really miserable. And sometimes you just need somebody outside to tell you that you're on the right track, and to help to point out to you how you are doing right, how you are going in the right direction. Okay, so that's what you need to change. And finally, I wanted to make the point about vision. You need to have a vision of where you want to go. There's an old saying, fear pushes until vision pulls. Well, fear is a good motivator, but if the fear is coming from a place of wanting to stay the same, then it's going to sabotage you. It's not going to allow you to move forward. So you need to have the vision to move you forward. And some of you have probably heard the story of when my mother was dying, and she made me realize that if I didn't start living a life true to myself, if I didn't start doing what I wanted to do instead of pleasing everybody else, I was going to die with regret. And that was a powerful, powerful motivator. Now, that's kind of like fear, but it broke me out of the habit of being a pleaser. So sometimes you need to, and then I started getting a vision, and I had to tell you, yeah, there was a lot of fear pushing, but eventually I started to see the possibility of finishing my documentary film series, of reaching people, of really feeling that commitment to wanting to wake people up to this precious and impermanent life. So that's what I'm reminding you of right now, is don't wait. Start changing now. I waited until I was 48 years old. Okay, so that's like a long time to wait to start living your life. And so if you're younger, please go. And if you're older, it's not too late, because life is an evolution. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about visions. So maybe your vision is to have a successful business, and you've been sabotaging yourself. I had a client who really wanted to stop working so hard. You need to have a bigger vision than that. You need to have a vision that really excites you. It's not a vision that takes away what you don't like, but it's a vision that moves you towards something. So that's what you want in terms of a vision for business. Now, vibrant health, the same kind of thing, that you want to have an enticing vision, not an absence of pain, but more energy. And then if you had that more energy, what would you do with it? So I had one client who had a lot of health issues, but when I got her connected to her vision and her purpose, her health changed fast. You start to see how these three things, health, wealth, and love, are connected. So finally, what about love? Are you looking for a soulmate or a twin flame, somebody who you can be intimate with, somebody who you can spend time with, somebody who you can share ideas with and go to parties with? And I'm a little old for this, but maybe you want to have children with, and have, maybe you have an idea for a business together. Although that's a tricky one, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but to have a vision together, to build something together. So I had a client who was settling for less because of the fear. She was like, she didn't want to go and do the emotional work that she needed to do in order to make herself available for a more intimate relationship. So that's the way, if we really have fear about intimacy because we're afraid of rejection, we will sabotage ourselves. So you can see how that might happen. And that's what she does, is she's always choosing partners that are not a good match. And when she does choose one that seems like a good match, they're not really ready, or they don't want to make a commitment, and so they're really not a good match. But the reality is that when you do the inner work, when you heal the wounds that make you feel afraid of intimacy, that make you hesitant to get deeply involved with somebody, that's when you're able to attract success in your life. So the bottom line on all of this is authenticity. Live your brilliant life. Be who you truly are. And that is a work in progress. And that's life. We all come into this world and we all experience a certain amount of difficulty. That hones us, that develops who we are. And that actually gives us the tools, the knowledge, the special awarenesses that are going to help us to do the work that we're meant to do. If you want to have a conversation, please click on the link. Oh, and also I'm going to be doing a Facebook challenge called 5-Day Makeover. And there is a link there for my group where those challenge trainings are going to take place. So you're going to need to get in the group. So click on the link. It's free. And not only that, but you'll be able to see all the videos, the Facebook Lives I've been doing right now. It'll be an easy place for you to find them. I hope you have a great day and be brilliant. Bye for now.